The luxury plane stood still at the gate, ready for takeoff. Passengers were slowly walking in, smiling and looking for their seats. The air was calm and quiet until a woman in a fancy white dress and shiny high heels stepped onto the plane. Her name was Mrs. Taylor. She walked with pride, holding her designer handbag close. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup smooth and rich. She didn't smile at anyone. Her eyes looked sharp, like someone who thought the world was below her. As she walked down the aisle, her heels clicked loudly on the floor. She glanced at each row until her eyes stopped at seat 3A. Sitting there was a young black boy, around 10 years old, wearing neat clothes and holding a book in his small hands. His name was Jaden. He had big, curious eyes and a silver pendant around his neck. He was sitting alone, calmly, reading and waiting for the plane to take off. Mrs. Taylor's face twisted with disgust. She stopped walking and stared at Jaden. "What is this?" she said loudly. No, this can't be right." The other passengers nearby turned to look. A flight attendant, a young woman named Sophie, quickly came over with a warm smile. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Mrs. Taylor pointed at Jaden with her perfectly polished finger. "I paid for first class. I paid for peace, and you put me beside him." Jaden looked up, confused. His smile faded. He wasn't sure what he had done wrong. Sophie blinked, surprised. "Ma'am, this is your assigned seat. And this boy is also a first-class passenger." Mrs. Taylor laughed coldly. "You must be joking. There's no way he belongs here. Look at him. I need another seat. Right now." Jaden looked down at his hands. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. But his fingers began to shake just a little. The passengers around them were watching closely now. Some pulled out their phones. A quiet tension filled the air. "I don't understand," Mrs. Taylor continued, getting louder. "Where are his parents? Why is he sitting alone? This is not a playground. This is first class." Jaden slowly looked up at the woman and spoke in a soft voice. "I can move if you want, ma'am." His voice was polite. He wasn't angry. He just wanted peace. But his words were full of pain. "No, sweetie," Sophie said quickly, bending down to Jaden. "You don't have to move. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." Mrs. Taylor crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous. I'm not flying like this. I have important meetings. I can't be next to him." A man in row 4 leaned forward and said, "Ma'am, maybe the problem isn't the seat. Maybe the problem is you." Gasps spread around the cabin. Mrs. Taylor turned red with anger. "Excuse me, who do you think you are?" she snapped. Sophie took a deep breath. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. You're disturbing the other passengers." Mrs. Taylor stepped back, arms still folded, her eyes locked on Jaden. He looked away and wiped his eye when no one was watching. Sophie leaned closer to Mrs. Taylor and spoke in a low voice. "Before you say anything else, maybe you should know who he is." Mrs. Taylor raised her eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Sophie didn't answer right away. She looked at Jaden, then looked toward the back of the plane. More whispers filled the air. A woman across the aisle whispered to her husband, "Why is she so angry at a child?" Her husband replied, "People show who they really are when no one's watching." Jaden sat quietly. He didn't talk back. He didn't argue. But inside, he felt small, not because of Mrs. Taylor's words, but because he had seen this before. It wasn't the first time someone looked at his skin and saw a problem. It wasn't the first time someone made him feel like he didn't belong. But something was different this time. He held the silver pendant around his neck and closed his eyes. Sophie stood up straight. "Ma'am," she said clearly, "every passenger in this cabin paid for comfort and peace, and that includes this young boy." Mrs. Taylor looked shocked. "Are you taking his side?" Sophie didn't answer. She just turned and walked away, heading to the back of the plane. Mrs. Taylor stood there, frozen, her face still burning with anger. Suddenly, A tall man in a clean black suit began walking down the aisle, slowly and calmly. His face was serious. His steps were quiet, but strong. People turned their heads to look. Jaden opened his eyes and saw the man. For the first time, he smiled. The man walked up to Mrs. Taylor and looked straight into her eyes. He said just 5 words. "That boy is not alone." The man in the black suit stood calmly in front of Mrs. Taylor. His face was serious, and his eyes sharp, but he didn't raise his voice. He simply said, "That boy is not alone." Mrs. Taylor blinked. For a second, she didn't know what to say. Then her face tightened again. "And who exactly are you?" she asked, folding her arms. "His uncle. His babysitter." The man didn't smile. He turned to Jaden, who was still sitting quietly in seat 3A. "Are you okay, son?" the man asked gently. Jaden nodded. "Yes, Dad." Gasps filled the cabin. "Dad?" Passengers whispered in surprise. Phones were still recording. Some people began to smile quietly, finally realizing what was happening. Mrs. Taylor's eyes grew wide. "You're his father?" "Yes," the man replied calmly. "My name is Mr. Carter." Mrs. Taylor looked him up and down, clearly trying to understand. "And what exactly do you do, Mr. Carter?" "Own a barber shop." The insult hung heavy in the air. A woman nearby covered her mouth in shock. A man 2 rows behind muttered, "She really said that out loud." Mr. Carter didn't flinch. He simply looked at the flight attendant, Sophie, and asked, "Is everything being recorded?" Sophie nodded. "Yes, sir. The cameras are on. And many passengers have their phones out too." Mrs. Taylor suddenly looked around and noticed all the phones pointed at her. Her smile disappeared. "I was just uncomfortable," she said quickly. "I didn't mean anything bad." Mr. Carter looked her in the eyes. "You said my son didn't belong in first class. That's more than just uncomfortable." Mrs. Taylor tried to laugh it off. "It was just a misunderstanding. I didn't know he was your son. I mean, he's alone. And you know how things are these days." Mr. Carter raised his hand, stopping her. "Let me be clear. My son is smart, well-mannered, and more mature than many adults in this room. He doesn't need to prove himself to anyone." Jaden looked up at his father, his eyes full of pride. But Mrs. Taylor wasn't done. "You people always turn everything into a race issue," she said loudly, looking around like she wanted support. "I was just asking for comfort." A loud sigh came from the back of the cabin. Another woman said, "Lady, the only uncomfortable thing here is you." Mrs. Taylor turned red. Her voice rose again. "This is ridiculous. I demand to speak to the captain. Someone needs to move. I won't sit next to that child. I won't be treated this way." Jaden shrank in his seat, but Mr. Carter placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You've said enough," Mr. Carter said, still calm. "But if you want the captain involved, I'll make the call." Mrs. Taylor scoffed. "Please, what power do you have here?" Sophie, the flight attendant, suddenly returned, this time with the pilot walking behind her. The captain, a tall man with a strong voice, stopped and saluted Mr. Carter with respect. "Good to see you again, sir," the captain said. "Didn't expect you on this flight." Mr. Carter nodded. "Just trying to get my son home. Didn't expect a scene either." Mrs. Taylor's mouth dropped open. You know each other." The captain smiled at her, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Mr. Carter is part of the ownership group of this airline. He's one of the main investors." Gasps again filled the cabin. Mrs. Taylor stumbled back a step. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," the captain replied. "You judged, you insulted, and now everyone sees it." Mrs. Taylor began to sweat. Her perfect hair no longer looked so perfect. "I didn't mean harm," she whispered, her voice shaking now. "It's all just a mistake. I was just surprised. That's all." "No," Mr. Carter said quietly. "You were proud. You thought your money gave you power. But real power is in respect. Jaden looked up again. His father squeezed his shoulder gently. Mrs. Taylor tried again. Can't we just move past this? I don't want problems. I just want peace. Peace, the captain repeated. Ma'am, peace isn't possible when people are treated like they don't belong. Sophie nodded. We can find you another seat, in economy. Or, if you prefer, we can have you removed from the flight. Mrs. Taylor looked like she'd been slapped. Economy. Me? Yes, Sophie said politely but firmly. Or security can meet you at the gate. Mrs. Taylor looked around. Not a single passenger was on her side. Not one face looked sorry for her. Not one voice stood up for her. Slowly, she lowered her head. Her voice was now small. I'll go to economy. Good choice, Mr. Carter said, turning back to Jaden. As Mrs. Taylor walked down the aisle, her face red with shame, the passengers clapped, not loudly, but firmly. Jaden leaned against his seat, feeling a little safer, a little stronger. His father sat beside him now. Don't let people like her make you smaller, Mr. Carter said softly. You shine, no matter where you sit. Jaden smiled. His pendant rested gently on his chest. But something told him this wasn't the end. Something bigger was coming. The plane finally took off, rising into the clouds with a low, steady hum. The drama from earlier still hung in the air like heavy smoke, but things were quieter now. Jaden sat by the window again, his eyes following the soft white clouds. His heart still beat a little fast, but he felt better now. His father, Mr. Carter, sat beside him, calm and quiet, like always. But across the plane, people were whispering. Did you hear what the pilot said? He owns part of the airline. Is he rich? No wonder he kept so calm. Powerful people don't need to shout. I wonder what he really does. Even the flight crew looked curious now. Who exactly was Mr. Carter? Jaden looked up at his father. Dad, are you okay? Mr. Carter smiled. I'm fine, son. You did well. But why didn't you tell her who you were right away? Mr. Carter looked out the window for a moment. Then he spoke in a soft voice. Because it's not about who I am. It's about who you are. You didn't do anything wrong. You don't have to prove anything. Not to her. Not to anyone. Jaden nodded slowly. But the questions in his young heart didn't go away. After a few minutes, one of the flight attendants, a young man named David, quietly came up to Mr. Carter. Excuse me, sir, David said politely. I just wanted to say thank you for staying calm. We're all proud to have you on board. Mr. Carter gave a small nod. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. David hesitated. If you don't mind me asking, what do you really do, sir? Jaden looked up, also waiting for the answer. It was a question even he had asked many times before. Mr. Carter chuckled. Well, that's a long story. David smiled nervously. We have 6 hours till we land. Mr. Carter looked at Jaden. Should I tell him? Jaden grinned. You always keep it secret. Maybe it's time. Mr. Carter leaned back in his seat. He didn't raise his voice, but somehow everyone nearby could hear every word he said. I grew up in the south side of Chicago. No money, no name, just dreams. Passengers started turning their heads to listen again. I worked 2 jobs in high school, studied at night, got into college on a scholarship, learned about tech, about business, about leadership. People laughed at me, called me names, said I'd never make it. Jaden listened closely. He had heard bits of this before, but not like this. I didn't stop, Mr. Carter continued. I started a company in my garage. It failed. Started another. That one failed too. But the third one changed everything. A man across the aisle asked, what company was it? Mr. Carter smiled. Carter Tech. Now more people gasped. Wait, Carter Tech. The company that builds AI engines for global airlines. The one that supplies security systems for airports around the world. Yes, Mr. Carter said. That one. Even Mrs. Taylor, now sitting far in economy class, heard the name. Her face turned pale. Someone whispered, "He's not just rich. He's a giant." But Mr. Carter kept his voice low and steady. "I never built the company to be rich. I built it to protect people like my son, to create spaces where we belong, where no one can say we don't deserve to be there." Jaden felt his heart swell with pride. His dad wasn't just powerful, he was good. David asked carefully, "So why do you fly commercial? You could have your own private jet." Mr. Carter nodded. "I do have one. But I wanted Jaden to see the real world. To know that respect isn't about money or status. It's about how you treat people." The cabin was silent for a moment. Even the babies seemed quiet. And then, someone started clapping. One person, then two, then five. Soon, the entire first-class cabin was applauding. Not for the money, not for the power, but for the message. Mr. Carter nodded in thanks, but he didn't smile wide. He just looked at his son. "You see, Jaden," he said, "people like that woman judge you by your skin, your age, your silence. But they have no idea who you really are. One day, you'll walk into a room, and the room will change just because you're in it." Jaden's eyes were bright now. "Because I'm your son." Mr. Carter shook his head. "No, because you're you." Jaden leaned against his dad's shoulder. But back in economy class, Mrs. Taylor sat frozen, her hands trembling. She had tried to insult a child. She had tried to move him, and now she couldn't move at all. But fate wasn't done with her yet, because someone was about to join the flight from the next stop. Someone who knew exactly who she was and what she had done before. The plane made its first scheduled stop at a major international airport to refuel and pick up a few connecting passengers. Most travelers remained seated, but a few stretched their legs. Jaden looked out the window, watching ground crew vehicles move below like tiny ants. He was calm now, resting beside his father. But far back in economy class, Mrs. Taylor sat stiffly in her narrow seat. Her perfect makeup had started to smudge. She held her designer purse tightly in her lap, not daring to look at the passengers who had witnessed her earlier outburst. She thought the worst was over. She was wrong. Just then, the boarding door opened again. The flight crew stood near the entrance, smiling and ready to greet the new passenger. A tall, confident black woman stepped onto the plane. She wore a sharp navy blue suit, shiny black heels, and carried a sleek laptop bag. Her presence was bold, elegant, and undeniable. She looked around the cabin with kind but commanding eyes. Her name was Dr. Maya Freeman, a best-selling author, international human rights lawyer, and public speaker. She was known around the world for fighting against injustice and racism. And she was also Mrs. Taylor's former college classmate. Mrs. Taylor saw her the moment she stepped on. Her heart nearly stopped. "No, it can't be her," she whispered to herself. But it was. Maya walked with purpose. As she passed economy class, her sharp eyes scanned the rows, and then locked on Mrs. Taylor. Recognition hit instantly. Maya paused. Mrs. Taylor looked away quickly, pretending to search her bag. But Maya turned to her anyway. "Well, if it isn't Rebecca Taylor." Mrs. Taylor smiled awkwardly. "Oh, Maya, I didn't expect to see you here." "Clearly," Maya said with a short nod. Her voice was calm, but strong. "What a surprise," Mrs. Taylor added, trying to act friendly. "You look well." "I am well," Maya said, looking around. "But I hear you've been making quite a scene on this flight." Mrs. Taylor's face turned red. "It was all a big misunderstanding. I didn't mean anything wrong. Things were taken out of context." Maya didn't smile. She had heard stories like that too many times. "I've seen the videos," Maya said softly. "So have millions of people now." Mrs. Taylor gasped. "What? What do you mean, millions?" Maya showed her phone. A video titled, Entitled woman refuses seat next to black child. Instantly regrets it. Was already going viral online. Thousands of comments. Thousands of shares. Mrs. Taylor covered her mouth in horror. No, no, no. This can't be happening. It's happening, Maya said firmly. Actions have consequences, Rebecca. Please, Mrs. Taylor whispered. You know me. We went to college together. I'm not a racist. You know that. Maya raised an eyebrow. I also remember you laughing when someone mocked my hair. I remember you saying I only got into school because of diversity points. You've been this way for a long time. Mrs. Taylor was speechless. I forgave you back then, Maya continued. But now you insulted a child. In public. And worse, you acted like you were the victim. I didn't know he was important. Mrs. Taylor blurted out. Maya narrowed her eyes. You see, that's the problem. You shouldn't need someone to be rich or powerful to treat them with basic respect. That boy is important because he's a human being. A child. Mrs. Taylor's eyes filled with tears now. My life is over. No, Maya said softly, but it might be time to change how you live it. Just then, a flight attendant walked up. Excuse me, Dr. Freeman. We've upgraded you to first class as a courtesy. Your seat is ready. Maya smiled politely. Thank you. Before she walked away, she looked at Mrs. Taylor one last time. Maybe you needed this moment to finally see who you've become. And with that, Maya walked down the aisle, her heels clicking confidently with each step. Passengers watched in silence as she entered first class. When she passed by Jaden's seat, she smiled warmly at him. Hello, young man, she said gently. I'm proud of you. Jaden blushed. Thank you, Mom. She then looked at Mr. Carter and nodded. You raised a fine son. Mr. Carter nodded back. And the world is lucky to have a woman like you in it. The moment was powerful, quiet, but full of meaning. Back in economy, Mrs. Taylor slowly curled into her seat. Her past had caught up with her. And now, the world was watching. As the plane continued its long journey across the sky, something unexpected was happening on the ground. Something that would change everything for Mrs. Taylor. The video of her refusing to sit next to Jaden had already been uploaded by a passenger sitting a few rows behind. It started with her loud complaint, her uncomfortable tone, and her insulting words. Then came the silence in the cabin. The video also showed Mr. Carter calmly walking forward, taking his son's hand, and returning to his seat without saying a word to her. No yelling, no anger, just dignity. And then came the pilot's announcement. For the record, Mr. Carter doesn't need to explain who he is. He helped build this airline. That one sentence sent the internet into flames. Within an hour, the video spread across social media. It was posted on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and even major news platforms. #RespectJaden. #CarterTechCEO. #Planaricism. All started trending worldwide. People were angry, but not just at Mrs. Taylor. They were angry that this still happened in the world. A child, a kind, quiet boy, had been humiliated for no reason except the color of his skin. The internet responded fast and loud. Celebrities posted support for Jaden. News anchors shared clips of the flight. Talk show hosts began preparing stories for the evening headlines. One well-known actor tweeted, "This little boy handled the situation better than most adults." His father, a true role model. #RespectJaden. Even airline staff from other companies began sharing their own stories about discrimination and how passengers like Mr. Carter inspired change. Meanwhile, in the sky, Jaden was asleep now, his head resting gently against his father's arm. He didn't know what was happening below, but Mr. Carter knew. His phone buzzed again and again with emails, notifications, and calls from people around the world. He looked down at his son, a small smile on his face. He didn't need the attention. He didn't want the spotlight. But maybe, just maybe, This moment could start something bigger. Across the aisle, Dr. Maya Freeman was also receiving updates. Her assistant had texted her from the ground. Video is at 5 million views in 1 hour. News outlets want interviews. Call me when you land. Maya looked at Mr. Carter and softly said, "You've just woken up the world." Mr. Carter nodded slowly. Let's hope the world finally listens. Back in economy class, Mrs. Taylor was not okay. She had seen the video. She had seen her face, angry, loud, and full of hate, playing over and over again. She had seen the comments. This is why racism still exists. She should be banned from flying. How can someone treat a child like that? Imagine being this bold in 2025. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the endless stream of hate directed at her. She wanted to delete her accounts. She wanted to hide. But it was too late. People were digging into her past. Old social media posts. Comments she made in college. Things she thought were forgotten were now on full display. Her job, her reputation, her name were all at risk. And all because of one moment, one sentence. I paid for comfort, not to sit beside him. Later, during the flight, a crew member walked down the aisle and quietly handed Mrs. Taylor a note. She opened it with shaking fingers. It read, "When you land, security will escort you to the terminal. We suggest you avoid the media. A PR representative is waiting to help you leave quietly." Her heart dropped. There were cameras waiting. The whole world knew her name. She covered her face and leaned back in her seat, too scared to cry, too ashamed to move. Back in first class, Jaden slowly opened his eyes. "Are we there yet?" he asked sleepily. "Not yet," Mr. Carter said, brushing his son's hair softly. "But the world is changing." Jaden looked confused. "Because of me." "Because of how you acted," his father said, "with kindness, with strength, with dignity." Jaden smiled a little. "Will she say sorry?" "I don't know," Mr. Carter replied. "But that's not your burden to carry." The rest of the cabin was quiet now, but peaceful. People respected the boy. They respected the father. They respected the power of silence, grace, and truth. And even though they were still flying above the clouds, it felt like something big had already landed. A message that couldn't be ignored anymore. The sun had just started to rise when the plane began its slow descent. Golden light spilled through the windows, touching the tired but thoughtful faces of the passengers. The pilot's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final approach. Local time is 6:15 a.m. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for landing." Jaden sat up slowly and rubbed his eyes. He yawned and looked out the window. "We're almost home?" he asked. His father, Mr. Carter, smiled and nodded. "Yes, and the world outside has changed while you were sleeping." Jaden didn't understand everything yet, but he could feel it in the air, the way people looked at him now, with respect, with kindness, even with guilt. He noticed that a flight attendant brought him a warm towel and offered him juice with a gentle smile. Another brought a small toy airplane and placed it in his hand. "Just a little something for our brave young traveler," she said warmly. Jaden looked at his father. "Why are they being so nice now?" Mr. Carter placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Because sometimes the truth makes people see better. And you helped show the truth." In the back of the plane, Mrs. Taylor sat frozen, her heart pounding faster with every minute. She had barely spoken since the conversation with Dr. Freeman. Her phone was still blowing up with angry messages, news alerts, and missed calls from her office. She had worked for years to build her image, her brand, her job in luxury fashion, her perfect life, her friends, all built on how the world saw her. And now, it was falling apart with every second. "You're trending for the wrong reason," one of her colleagues had texted. "Boss wants to talk when you land. It doesn't look good." Her career was slipping through her fingers. She looked out the window as the airport came into view. Flashing lights, gates, trucks, and cameras. Lots of them. News vans, reporters, people holding signs. Security had already warned her that the press would be waiting. She felt dizzy. She had never imagined a simple flight would end like this. As the plane touched down, there was silence in the cabin. Even though landing was always a noisy moment, this time it felt heavy, important. The wheels hit the ground, and the plane slowed down on the runway. Everyone stayed quiet, glancing at each other, knowing they had been part of something bigger than a normal trip. The pilot spoke again. "Welcome to New York. On behalf of the crew, thank you for flying with us today. And to a few special passengers, thank you for reminding us all what dignity looks like." People began clapping, not just politely, but with feeling. Many turned to Jaden and Mr. Carter, offering smiles, nods, and even soft apologies. One man leaned across the aisle. "Sir, I saw what happened. I just want to say, your son has more class than most adults I know." Another woman added, "Thank you for showing us how to respond with strength, not hate." Mr. Carter nodded humbly. "Thank you." Jaden looked a little shy, but he whispered to his dad, "This feels like a movie." His dad chuckled. Sometimes, the truth is more powerful than any movie. At the gate, as the door opened, police officers and airline security stood ready. A private escort waited for Mr. Carter and Jaden to help them exit safely through a separate path, away from the reporters and cameras. But they didn't leave right away. Mr. Carter turned to the crew. "I want to thank you," he said, "for doing your job with respect, even under pressure." The head flight attendant shook his hand. "It was an honor, sir. We're sorry you even had to deal with what happened." "No need to say sorry," Carter replied. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Next time it happens to anyone else, stand up for them, even if they're not rich, even if no one's filming." The attendant nodded. "I promise." Jaden gave the man a small wave as they walked down the private jetway. Mrs. Taylor's exit. Mrs. Taylor was told to stay in her seat until everyone else had deboarded. It felt like punishment, like shame. When she was finally allowed to leave, 2 airport security guards walked beside her. Outside the gate, flashing cameras and shouting reporters waited. "Mrs. Taylor, do you regret what you said? Will you apologize to the boy? Are you losing your job?" She tried to hide her face, but someone yelled, "You said you paid for comfort. What does comfort mean to you now?" The guards quickly moved her toward a side door, but she heard every word, every shout, every judgment. It was all happening so fast, and it was only the beginning. Meanwhile, in the VIP lounge, Mr. Carter and Jaden sat in a quiet room, sipping warm tea. Reporters were still asking for interviews, but Carter refused them all for now. "This moment belongs to Jaden," he said, "and I don't want it to become a circus." Dr. Maya Freeman joined them a few minutes later. She gave Jaden a soft hug. "People are listening," she said to Carter. "You've started something powerful." "I didn't start it," he said. "The world just saw a mirror. Now let's see what they do with the reflection." 3 days had passed since the flight that changed everything. 3 days since Jaden's quiet dignity inspired millions. 3 days since Mrs. Taylor's face had been seen by the world for all the wrong reasons. 3 days of nonstop news, anger, debate, and reflection. The world was still talking. But now, the question was, what happens next? Jaden's new reality. Jaden was back at school, but nothing felt normal. His classmates treated him like a hero. Teachers gave him hugs. The principal asked him to speak at assembly. But Jaden didn't feel like a hero. "I just sat down," he told his dad. "I didn't do anything special." Mr. Carter smiled gently. Sometimes doing nothing wrong is what makes you strong. He was proud of his son, but he also knew this fame wouldn't last forever. What mattered more was the lesson the world learned. And now, the world was waiting for Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Taylor's silence. While the world talked, she stayed silent. She turned off her phone, closed her social media, refused interviews. She was suspended from work. Her own family had stopped answering her calls. She had cried more in 3 days than she had in years. But she wasn't crying because she got caught. She was crying because, for the first time, she truly saw herself. She rewatched the video. Not once, not twice, but 15 times. And each time, it hurt more. She saw the fear in Jaden's eyes, the silence in the cabin, the way Mr. Carter simply took his son's hand and walked away, and the pilot's calm but powerful voice. Mr. Carter helped build this airline. He doesn't need to explain who he is. She had judged a child, a father, a stranger, all because of skin color. Now the world was judging her. And honestly, they were right. The letter. On the 4th day, a message arrived at Carter Tech headquarters. It was a handwritten envelope. No stamps. No return address. Mr. Carter opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. It read, "Dear Mr. Carter and Jaden, I am sorry. Not the kind of sorry that people say when they're caught. Not the kind that's forced by a lawyer or a company. I'm sorry because I saw myself in that video, and I was ashamed. I didn't just hurt a child. I insulted an entire history. My words came from ignorance and arrogance, and Jaden's silence. That was louder than anything I've ever heard. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I want to change. I have to. I've signed up for racial bias training. I've left my job. I'm joining a foundation that helps educate people like me, people who never question the ideas they grew up with. If Jaden ever wants to meet again, on his terms, I would be honored. But if not, I will carry this lesson forever. I am deeply sorry. Claire Taylor." Mr. Carter read the letter once, then again. He handed it to Jaden. Jaden was quiet. After a while, he whispered, "Does this mean she's a good person now?" Mr. Carter took a deep breath. "It means she's trying to be." 1 week later, a surprise meeting. At a small community event hosted by Dr. Maya Freeman's foundation, families gathered to talk about race, respect, and healing. Cameras weren't allowed. This wasn't for headlines. It was for hearts. Mr. Carter and Jaden were there, quietly sitting among the crowd. And then, Claire Taylor walked in. No fancy clothes, no makeup, just a humble woman with shaking hands and red eyes. She didn't walk toward the stage. She didn't ask to speak. She just waited near the back. Jaden saw her. Their eyes met. Slowly, Jaden stood and walked over. Everyone watched in silence. Claire knelt down to his level. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Jaden looked at her carefully. He didn't smile. He didn't hug her. But he said 4 words that surprised everyone. "Thank you for trying." She nodded, tears falling freely now. Mr. Carter stepped forward. He didn't shake her hand, but he said, "Change doesn't start when people get caught. It starts when they finally listen." Claire whispered, "I'm listening now." The last scene. Later that night, as Jaden got ready for bed, he looked at his father. "Do you think people really change?" Mr. Carter sat beside him and replied, "Only if they want to, and only if they keep trying every day." Jaden smiled and pulled the toy airplane from his pocket. "I think I'd want to be a pilot one day," he said. Mr. Carter chuckled. "Then fly high, son, and always keep your head higher than hate." Jaden looked out the window. The night sky was peaceful. No noise, no judgment, just stars. And somewhere out there, the world was learning, one heart at a time.